Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. So glad you guys could join me in another episode of Men's Stories and Conversations. I'd like to welcome and thank you for your continual support to all my past listeners and welcome all my new listeners that are new to this community as I'm really excited about what you're going to experience here today. So get comfortable as you sit back with this community that cares about you and hopes that you can feel God's love, but also see God's glory in men's real stories. So as always, I got a special guest today. I'm really excited about all the guests that God leads me to, that God leads to me. I mean, I could truly tell you about some incredible stories about how I meet so many of my guests and how God has kind of narrated the whole story, even when he kind of had to give me the faith to step in and knock on the doors. My guest today is a visionary founder and managing director of Bandelli Associates, a leadership advisory consulting firm based in New York City, and the author of the book, Relational Intelligence, the 5 essential skills you need to build life-changing relationships, and what every leader needs, the 10 universal and indisputable competencies of leadership effectiveness. So I'd like to welcome my guest and brother, Dr. Adam Bandelli.
Good morning,
hey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, my friend. Excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's an honor. I'm glad we finally were able to put this together and carve out the time to make this happen. So I'm going to let you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, just to give you a little bit of just a quick bio about yourself there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Adam Bandelli. I'm a leadership advisor and organizational psychologist. I started my journey, growing up in New Jersey. My parents got divorced when I was 5, and it was over faith. My father is a Muslim imam. My mother's Christian. And when they met, they talked about exposing their children to both faiths and letting their children decide as they grew older. And after my father had me and they got married, he wanted everyone to become Muslim. And so my mother made a tough decision when I was 5 that she chose her faith and chose Jesus over her husband. And so that really set the foundation for me growing up in a Christian home, baptism, Wednesday night Bible study, all the things that you learn and grow as you mature. Did my undergraduate in northern New Jersey at Fairleigh Dickinson University, where, I was an athlete first before anything else. You can tell by the shoes behind me for your listeners who can see.
Right.
Basketball, point guard, high school and college. But when I got to college, I realized I wasn't going to be like Mike and go to the NBA. So I had to really have a plan B. And I had a class my spring of my freshman year that was called industrial psychology. I had never heard of that before. And the instructor walks in a 3-piece suit with a Rolex. And I was like, okay, most of my professors wear flannel hoodies. And as he started talking about leadership and teamwork and goal setting and motivation, all the things I had done for a decade in sports. So that really resonated with me. And at the end of the semester, I started a habit that I do now with all my clients is I wrote him a handwritten letter, just thanking him for the class and what I learned. And if he had another class the upcoming year, I'd love to take it. And I got a letter from one of his graduate assistants about 6 weeks later. And he invited me to see him present at the American Psychological Association's annual conference in New York City on a topic that I never heard of before called emotional intelligence. And so I ran out to Sears and got a suit 3 sizes bigger than me, got my Vistaprint cards, and went to the conference. And after the conference, he took me out to lunch and he said, what do you want to do with your future? And as an eager, wet behind the ears kid, I said, I want to be like you. And he kind of gave me a path of what I would need to do. And so I spent the next decade really working on my master's and my PhD. He became my first mentor. I'm a firm believer for any man that you should have mentors in your life, those that you seek out and those that you cross, organically in life. But you had a really good opportunity to dissect emotional intelligence for a decade. Did my master's thesis on looking at the dark side of EQ and how leaders can sometimes use emotions to manipulate or use their employees. And so once we found that, we said, okay, maybe there's a separate set of skills that really enable leaders to build successful connections and long-term relationships with their employees and with their people. That led me down to the University of South Florida, where I did my PhD, did my doctoral dissertation on relational intelligence. So came up with the theory, came up with the 5 skills, and we built out a personality assessment to see, how we could measure it in people. And what we found, Robert, was that relational intelligence, if practiced by leaders, it leads to more engaged employees, people who are more committed to their organizations, and it ultimately helps the bottom line and drive financial profitability. So I was excited about those results. I sat my dissertation on the shelf, like most graduate students do when they're done with it, and joined a global management consulting firm where I spent a decade learning from some of the best in my industry about how to do CEO succession and leadership development and executive coaching and training and development. And so really learned the skills of what it means to be an organizational psychologist. Then about after a decade, I started to realize that most of the folks who did this type of work were older white men and white women. And I wanted to build a firm that was multicultural, multi-ethnic. And so I started my firm, Bandelli Associates, in 2016. So we'll be coming up on 7-year anniversary this February.
Congratulations.
Blessing in and of itself, where we really focus on 4 key things that make up my firm, Robert. One is we believe in this idea of relational intelligence. This is not a book or a cute idea. It's something that I live and breathe, and I've done for 15, 20 years now. And so what that means with our clients is we show up being authentic. We show up being genuine. We have a desire to build relationships with our clients, not just to grow financially, but to really help unleash their authentic selves and what that means for their people, teams, and organizations. So that's one swim lane. The second big piece is really around multicultural, multi-ethnicity. So I can proud to say today that my team is made up of folks from different races, different genders, age, faith-based, so a wide variety. And we really believe that diversity of thought is really important. And so we bring that to our clients. We embody that. We just don't talk about it. And then the third piece is really around, we want to help our leaders think differently. So we like to look at ourselves as thought catalysts. Can we bring an idea or a point of view to the table that really gets a leader to stop and reflect on themselves and then reflect on how they show up for their people? And then the last piece that's very near and dear to my heart personally is we're strong advocates for mental health awareness. So we just don't care about our business or our clients. We care about their physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being. And so those things kind of make up the firm. Sat down to write Relational Intelligence in January 2021. It was released this June 2022. And it's really been a launching pad for changing everything we do at the firm, from the training that we do to the coaching that we do. Everything is funneled through this lens of relational intelligence. And it's been a blessing in the last 2 years to see it impact in a positive way our clients. It's impacted the way I've led my firm and developed my people. And it's really helped a lot of people in their personal lives as well. And so very blessed to have been on this journey. It's a journey of faith. I'm sure we'll get into different aspects of it. But God's hand over my life since I was 5 has been there. And it's been a blessing to see how he's worked through me.
Wow. No, that's awesome. Wow. I mean, you gave me the full rundown there, and that's truly, I can say that with getting your book, I love to actually dissect and understand more about the author and reading the book. And as I read your book, I truly even thought about our first interview when, I reached out to you and you said, yeah, let's talk. And in that talk, we really covered a lot of the 5 principles that you cover. We established rapport right off. And I loved how in our initial conversation, we realized that we both connected immediately with the fact that we both went to or watched the same church, watched the same pastor. And that was, as I read your book, I was like, wow, look at how we established that rapport. And then we went on to kind of understand each other in different areas, get to know each other. I learned a lot about, the first question I asked you even was about the shoes behind you. And you kind of went into depth about and it's funny how we connected and I even started talking about the different years. Like, I remember that year when that came out. Yeah. And see, that immediately started to create rapport between the two of us. And that it was like, wow, that connected. That was like a connection of like, we both have a shoe thing in common, and that we both love shoes. We both kind of connect years and certain times in our lives to shoes. But also we then dove into like our faith and the importance of, why God calls us into certain seasons, where he's seen us in past seasons and different things like that. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about the season that God called you into when he asked you, or I guess when you were led, how your book came about, when you were kind of led into writing that, and what had happened previously? Because you have so many stories in that book, and that's why I feel like for men to really listen to or read your book, they will get a lot of understanding of you, the stories that have created you. But could you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, relational intelligence, like I said at the start, it started really in graduate school. And what had happened at the time, which is really, now I can look at it and see God's hand in it. Two simultaneous kind of swim lanes were taking place as I went to graduate school. I was 22 and I started to come up with this theory, but also at 22, I started feeling for the first time depressive symptoms. Never had been exposed to that before, didn't know what that was, but just the desire to get out of bed, the desire to shave my head, shave my face, go to the gym, a lot of things that, people will talk about someone when they're clinically depressed. I start to see them in my life. Have some family members who have struggled with depression over their lives, and they're like, you got to go see a therapist on campus or a counselor. I had never seen a therapist before. And so I went for a couple of sessions and, went back home to visit my family for the summer break, and the depression kind of lifted. And so me as a type A, hard going, man, I came back in the fall and I started going extra hard and pushing myself extra hard. And I started to notice certain behaviors that were on the other end of the scale in terms of like sleeping 2 hours a day, excessive working out, excessive work, just a lot of things that were more extreme. And then I took an internship in Cincinnati, and within 5 or 6 weeks, I was suicidal. And so it was a kind of just scary, scary time. My father took me to a psychiatrist for the first time. And I spoke to the psychiatrist maybe for 2 or 3 minutes to tell my story. And he just stopped me and said, "You have bipolar disorder, take these 3 meds and come back in 3 weeks." And for me, again, in my 20s, my ego was very big. I thought the world revolved around me. So I said, it's impossible for a doctoral student getting his PhD in psychology to have a mental health disorder. And so I lived in denial about it for almost a decade, which led to a substance abuse addiction. And I almost lost my life from an overdose. So it wasn't until rehab that I kind of accepted that I had bipolar, really, rededicated my life to Christ. It was right around that time that I was exposed to elevation worship. Resurrecting was a song that was out then. So that really kind of gave me hope each day.
That's
I
awesome.
could resurrect my own life and I could, come back from the ashes of what happened. But I started to see how relational intelligence and the way that I interacted with people and the things that I did a decade or so earlier with my dissertation were actually important. So building rapport with people, you have to be able to maintain eye contact when you sit down with someone. You have to be able to find common ground. You have to be able to listen and be a good active listener. Things around understanding others, like understanding my emotions, understanding when I was frustrated, understanding where people kind of hit my trigger buttons. So a lot of the skills that are in the framework, I started to see them surface in my life even more. And then we just did a post today on Instagram about this. I made a decision in January 2020 to put God first in every aspect of my life. From my morning routine with prayer and reading and journaling, to my tithing, to going to church every Sunday, to getting in a faith-based community. And I started to see transformation take place across my life. That habit of writing in a journal every morning, just my thoughts and my moods and my emotions, it really unlocked writer's block for me. A lot of men, a lot of people who do writing or write books or do kind of that type of stuff run into writer's block. And so for the first time, that was lifted. And I was able to write my first book, What Every Leader Needs, by the end of June, started it in February. And as I was writing that book, I started to say, wait a minute, this skill set of, building long-term relationships, that's another book. And then I dusted the dissertation off the shelf and I said, wow, we could do this. And so, in January 2021, continued the same pattern of just journaling and prayer every morning. And then I sat down to write the book in, February 2021, and I had it done by May. And so, that's kind of been, and then from that point, it's been really not just, like I said, an idea, but like the way that we show up for our clients, the way that we do work is centered around relational intelligence.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I love those tools that you threw out there, your morning routines, because I like to ask men, what are their morning routines normally? What prepares them for the day? And just the journaling part. I know a lot of men, we've talked about this on this podcast, and that sometimes men don't understand the importance of journaling or getting their thoughts out, getting their feelings out, getting their emotions, really putting stuff down on paper so that they can see it. What got you into journaling? What kind of created that funnel to say, you know what, maybe this is something I should try?
Yeah, so I got saved in 2007 down in a small non-denominational church in Tampa when I was doing my PhD. And we were going through as a church the purpose-driven life. And so we had small groups based around that book and, just started reading through the book. And the way the book is set up, it's 40 small little chapters, and it gives you a writing prompt at the end of each chapter. And so as part of my life group, I just did a chapter every morning and wrote in a journal to answer the prompt question every morning. And that started a habit back then that for the next like 13 years until 2020, I did intermittently here or there, journal for a month, come back to it 6 months later, but it didn't become a daily practice until 2020.
Nice. Okay. Okay. And it's funny. I tell a lot of people are like, yeah, but I don't like to write. And I talk about how like, yeah, but most of the time we always have a phone in our hand, and my phone, the notes in my phone have
I
become an
use a notes
extension of my
pad all the
brain.
time. Yep.
And I could be walking and all of a sudden having a feeling, or I could all of a sudden have a thought, and I won't sit there and maybe I'll think of that later. No, I'll pull my phone out and I'll start writing. I'll start typing, because if I don't, it almost, you're right, it creates a sense of like later, okay, what was that?
Yeah.
And I really want to think about it, and I want to kind of process that, but I've lost that. So yeah, no, I truly agree that that's truly important. And sometimes it starts with those books that create those questions to say, all right, so what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? So no, that's really good. So what do you do now? Like when it comes to your daily practice, I noticed that you say you take what you didn't write the book. You truly take the book into practice when you go into different organizations and different things and some of the things. How do you continue to build trust? Because I know trust is a big thing. How do you continue to build trust with your clients when a lot of them have experienced, whether it be negativity or situations where they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, last person that came in, they said this, or they said they would be able to provide this. How do you continue to do that?
Yeah, so we define developing trust at our firm as the ability to be vulnerable and risk being exposed to the actions and behaviors of others. And so anyone that's looking to build trust, or as we do it with our clients, there's really a couple of components that make it up. I think the first component in the book, I talk about the mirror test. And so before you build trust with a woman, or build trust with a client, or build trust with a family member, you have to do a deep dive on yourself and know how you're wired and what makes you tick. What are your values? What are the things you do well on your best days? What are some of the blind spots or things that can get you in a bad place if you're stressed or under pressure? And so really doing that work on yourself, Robert, to get a sense of kind of, do I trust myself? Do I trust how I show up to the world? Once you do that, you can start building trust with other people. And I talk about the currency of trust in the book. We call these the underlying aspects of trust, the 5 C's. And so, as a consultant or as a leader, can I trust, or can you as an employee trust that I will have the competence to show up each day and perform my job and be able to provide direction for you? Will I honor my commitments to you? Can you believe that as a leader, I'll honor my commitments, or as a consultant? Will I show up consistently for you? Will I be the same person day in and day out, regardless of my moods or my emotions or what's going on for me? Do I have good character? Do I have ethics and integrity and do the right things even when wrong things are going on around me? And then do I have courage? This is a really important one. Like, do you tell people what they need to hear, not just when they want to hear, when they're dropping the ball or when they're not living up to their standards that they've created? So practicing the 5 C's is a way to build that trust. And then another piece, I learned this from Levi Lesko, is this idea called intentional generosity. And so are you sowing into the lives of others without the expectation that you need to get something in return? A lot of leaders don't like to do that. A lot of folks will say, it's kind of transactional. You do this for me, I do that for you. Relationally intelligent leaders are comfortable in their own skins. There is a degree of humility where they can be vulnerable. I have some clients now that I work with through our training and work, like they talk to their people about their failures, or they talk to their people about their setbacks. They let them know that they're human as well. And that really engenders trust with their people. And then again, they continually invest in the talent around them. And so being intentionally generous shows people that, we're going after something that's bigger than just my individual needs. We're trying to contribute to the world in a certain way. We're trying to have an impact on people, and modeling those behaviors starts to create the conditions where people can practice them too.
Right, right. And it's funny, as you were talking about that, I know you were talking about things from a business standpoint, but if any person was truly listening to that, everything you just spoke about was just as important in your professional life, because everything, even the 4 C's that you cover, all of them were things that people need from people in a relationship, in a personal relationship. So this stuff is not just like okay, well, this is how you go to work. This is how you approach your business. This stuff is just as important in your personal life, in your relationships, as you build relationships, or seek relationships.
The way that we talk about it, this is a playbook of skills that you can use to build dynamic relationships across all areas of your life, personally, professionally. Now, the way that Robert develops trust is not going to be the way that Adam does, because we have different personalities and different beliefs and those type of things. But the skills are universal. You have to develop trust if you're going to build a strong relationship. You have to be able to be authentic to really connect with a person. You have to be able to embrace diversity of others in order to drive an organization, in order to build a marriage or build a relationship with your family members. So these skills are universal, but how we use them is all going to be different.
Right. No, very true. Very true. So you talked about the mirror test, and normally with the mirror test, not only does that make you have to sit with you, but it also sometimes takes you back to the authentic you, the you that you may have avoided. So what, I know that as you did the mirror test yourself, a lot of that took you back to the younger version of you, certain aspects of your life growing up. And what did you learn about you as you really thought about some of the things that had created Adam, even before you became the doctor that you are, even before you became the athlete? What were some of the things that reconnected it back to you that you've experienced that just created who you are?
Yeah, I think first and foremost that everything starts and stops with God. The Holy Spirit and the ability to have the Spirit work through you. I got saved in 2007. I didn't start learning these principles 2009, 2012, 2015, and actually could use them in my life. And so I think knowing that everything comes through his hands and everything that I do or that my people do is really through the power that we have with the Holy Spirit. And so that's a really big piece, I think, was a journey. I think the other thing that I learned about myself is that if humility is not practiced, God will teach it to you. And so, when I was in my early mid-20s, I, thought I was, great because I had a PhD and I was making six figures and living in New York City, almost that the world revolved around me. And I learned very quickly, Jesus talks about in Matthew how there's the man who builds his house on the sand, there's the man who builds his house on the rock. Right. And up until that point in my life, I had built my house on sand. And so, God had to, in my life, he had to humble me and strip everything away from me. At the time, I thought I was going to stay with my company that I was with for my entire career. Because of the addiction, I got fired and lost my job. I was engaged and got married at the time. And the woman I was with ended up divorcing me because she felt that I was living two lives. And so everything that I held as an idol, God stripped away. And then I had to rebuild my life on the rock, and I had to rebuild my life on faith and on, my relationship with Christ. And that wasn't a 1, 2, 3 thing either. It started in rehab, where I accepted that I had bipolar disorder. And I accepted that I had to really change the way that I behaved and the way that I viewed things. And then over the last decade, it really has become something that's a central force here, that, humility is something that, I don't take for granted now. Everything that I have can be taken away in an instant. And so it gives me a whole new perspective of how I approach life.
No, that's good. And I like how you said everything you have can be taken, because sometimes things have us, we don't have them. And we don't consider what would happen if we lost it all. More importantly, who are you without all of this?
That's right. Yep. Yeah.
So
when your identity is based in Christ, it frees up a lot of different things for you not to have to worry about, well, if I lose my job or I lose my car or there's a place in a solid rock and foundation that you have that enables you to give to other people.
Right. No, that's so true. That's so true. So how do you personally like to give back or find yourself giving, especially during these seasons where everybody's all about getting? What do you normally like to do to give back in your own special way?
So I think for me, it really goes back to this idea of mental health awareness. I think a lot of people, when I was first diagnosed in 2003, there was a huge stigma around mental health. People with bipolar disorder, depression, they're weak then, or they're broken, or they're damaged. And that was one of the things that contributed to me living in denial about it for close to a decade. So like I said, my firm, our social or philanthropic cause is mental health awareness. We have a partnership with the Black Mental Health Alliance, where we do a lot of pro bono work on educating our brothers and sisters in the Black and brown communities about mental health. especially for Black men. Like we've been taught since an early age, you don't show signs of weakness, you don't show vulnerability. There's gender stereotypes between men and women in the Black community. There's racism. There's things that have happened to us for decades and decades and years. And so as a Black man, understanding that it's okay to go seek help from a therapist. It's okay to go to a psychiatrist if you're struggling. It's okay to get a social support system. We just wrote an article. I want to bless your listeners with it. It's on our website called Your Playbook for Managing a Mental Health Disorder. And we talk about how you can use these 5 skills if you have a mental health disorder or if you know and love someone that has it. And so I think that's the way that I really try to give back, is to help, our brothers and sisters who are Black and brown really understand that it's okay if you're struggling. It's okay to be okay.
Right.
The help you need can really turn your life around.
No, so true. And I'll make sure I'll link that in the bio of this particular podcast episode. But and that's so true, because I truly myself have learned how important our mental health is, but also I struggle with sometimes trying to realize that a lot of it wasn't mirrored for us. It wasn't showcased for us. We didn't have that to see. So when we try to go back and talk to our parents about it, which I believe we talked about at one time, about how hard it may be for us to try to turn back around to those before us and say, this is why this is so important. And this is what the walk or the journey I'm on now, and trying to see how they perceive it. And I think I asked you one time, how do your parents perceive the importance of your mental health?
My whole family, it's been a journey. And I think anyone who has mental health, you have to understand that there's an education process of explaining and teaching your family. I mean, for many years, my family, they thought of bipolar, they thought of Britney Spears or Kanye West or some of the extremes you've seen in the media. And, mental health, depression, anxiety, bipolar, in my case, like, it's unique to every person.
Right.
Your mental health disorder is not your identity. And so your values, your beliefs, your faith, all those other things make up your identity. And so for me, even till today, my father, he's off the boat from Egypt. And so, he believes, mental health is not something that's real, and so I've had to educate him that it is, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to discuss it with the family. I've had to educate my siblings. One of my siblings, she's a physician, so she understands it more than my other siblings. But, there's been that piece there all along. And then I talk about in the book, my roots and foundation around relational intelligence was watching the empathy that my mother displayed for special ed students that she taught for 25 years, and how she interacted with kids and how she created a safe space, a psychologically safe space for them to be themselves. And so she's been my rock along the journey in terms of being a place I can go to, not judging me, whether I had an addiction or whether I struggled with something. And so it's been different for different parts of my family, but it's been a process of teaching them as well as I've been learning about it for myself.
Right. And so true. And I tell people, it takes you having to go to do the work to understand why it's important outside of what people may say, because there's a lot of things that people say. There's a lot of things that people feel important. And a lot of times we're looking at other people like, well, are they buying in? And if not, sometimes we may say, okay, well, nobody else is seeing the importance of this. Why should I? And what would you say to that for people who see the importance of investing in so many other areas of their life? Because, I mean, think about it. We invest in our sneakers. We invest in in what we wear. We invest in what we drive, where we live. But it seems like our health, our mental health, our even our physical health sometimes is not as invested into as much as those other areas.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really help any other people or build solid relationships if you first don't take care of yourself. Self-care and creating some habits and patterns in your life that are healthy and productive, it's so critical for men.
Right. And I'm also sure that growing up, you spoke about non-denominational church that you were going to previously. And I used to go to a non-denominational church. And I remember, and this is no knock to any church, but there used to be a thing of, okay, well, you got to choose your mental health or God. You got to choose your own self-care or God. And it was never therapy and God, or your mental health and God. How was that something that you experienced as well growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my mother took us to church every Wednesday night for Bible study every Sunday. And so that habit or that pattern of understanding that faith is part of life, it's not just a thing you do once a week, but it's a day in and day out thing. I think that laid the foundation of, being able to get up in the morning and pray, or go to sleep at night and pray, or just some of the habits that I have now. Those early foundations started with her taking us to church. Yeah.
Right. No, so true. So true. So what are you doing now in your life on a daily basis? I know as you continue to pour into your company and prepare yourself for 2023, and the different initiatives and things you guys are doing, what are you doing for Adam to prepare you outside of, I know you talked about journaling in your morning routine, but what are you doing personally to kind of prepare you for what you have to do for others as you lead others, as you walk into the door every day to set your team up for success?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Robert. I think so. My father introduced me to Tony Robbins when I was 15. Gave me a cassette tape, and it was this is in the 80s, so it was Tony Robbins' Personal Power series, where you listen to a cassette tape a day, and it kind of helps you think about your life. And up until that point, I just had goals in basketball, and I need to jump 10 more inches to dunk, or I need to do this or that. And it really opened the door for me to say you can set goals in every area of your life: spiritually, relationally, financially, emotionally, in your business or in your career. And so since that time, and I've refined it over the years for my own personal development, I will set a word for the year. What's the word? And Steve Furtick does this at Elevation.
Right.
We'll practice too. But what's your word for the year? And then from that, I'll go backwards and kind of build off goals and plans for that. So my word for 2023 is transformation. There are things in my life that I need to do in terms of my physical health. I have a couple bad habits, waking up at like 2 a.m. and snacking in the kitchen, things like that. So it's being able to start with that word. And then what we'll do is we'll build a word cloud around it. And any idea or thought, I have scripture verses. Big scripture verses me is too much it was given, much is required. And so I'll fill up that word cloud with all those different things that are going to be rallying cries or a mantra that I use for the year. I put that right in my living room where I see it every day when I'm sitting down watching TV with the family. So it's a visual there for me. And then I'll usually take that, and from that, I'll build 2 or 3 goals in each area of my life. So physically, for example, I want to go to the gym 4 to 5 times this year. A week. Last year I went 2 or 3, or I wasn't consistent with the gym and with my workout routines. So that's one of the goals that are coming from it. In terms of my relationships, 2 of my siblings have kids now. And so spending more times with my niece and nephews and kind of focusing on going down and visiting them and sowing into their lives. So it starts with that word of the year for me. I then build off ideas around that, and then I'll set goals from that. And so I've been doing that every year now for the last 25 years of my life.
Right. No, and that's awesome. And I love that concept of creating a word that you're going to go into each year with. I know a lot of people set goals. Oh, I'm going to go and do this. But a lot of times, right. And those are all built off of some thought, but you almost have to create the thought to almost create the other clouds of what you have to do in order to lean into that word. So no, that's great. And I've already set my word for this upcoming year. But I know in this past year, I talked about how my word was authenticity and how I had to truly tap back into who I was to be my authentic version. And that was almost like my initiation into dealing with my mental health, because when you do start to realize who you are outside of who you've been, then you realize, okay, I have to be authentic to be me. And that's, it truly created my 2022, which then led into my 2023 word, which was purpose. That's right. And understanding what God's plan and purpose was for me. So no, that's awesome right there. Yeah. So with all that said, and as you continue to move forward, are there any plans to maybe tap into another book? Is there another book? And I know it's I just wrote a book in 2021. So here comes that question of well, did you just have, I know you just had a baby, but is there another baby coming? I know how people always want to rush you to the next thing.
Yeah. So a couple different things out there. So I wrote What Every Leader Needs in 2020. I wrote Relational Intelligence in 2021. Instead of writing a book this year, 2022, I've written close to 25 articles on relational intelligence in all aspects of life. So relational intelligence in dating, relational intelligence in mentoring, relational intelligence in personalities like extroverts versus introverts, relational intelligence in the Great Resignation, or team building, or developing trust in your organization. So that really kind of tickled the writing, creative side of me over this year to write, an article almost in, 2 articles a month or so. The next book is going to be focused on how to deal with some of the most challenging and difficult relationships in your life by using these skills. So every one of us has that, family member or friend who's a narcissist. Everyone has that family member or friend who's a passive aggressive person. Everyone has that family member or friend who can't manage their emotions. So the next book is really going to be about teaching men and women how to use trust and how to use understanding others and how to use influence to work around dealing with some of the difficult or most challenging people we come across in life.
That's good. That's really good in a culture where everybody's trying to match energy. Like, okay, so if they want to be this way, then you know what? I'm going to match that. I'm going to show you who's the bigger, passive aggressive person or whatever. So no, that's really important. That's so important because I think I hear that every day. Every once in a while, I'll look up, you may be scrolling and see another person saying, well, I'll show them, like, if they think they're the bigger. And that's another thing, because I love how if you don't follow Adam, he's a great follower, and that he has a lot of quotes daily that truly make you kind of like sit back and have to think like, or like, wow, okay, that's a good one to process. Because I tell people, sometimes people say, I don't know what to journal. And sometimes you just need a thought to really get you going to journal.
Thought starter. Yeah. We release content every day, at Adam Bandelli on Instagram. And we put out there reels, and we put out there quotes or things from my books or other things that we do to really do exactly what you said, Robert, is to stop people in their tracks and say, wait a minute, I didn't think about planning for the next 6 months of my life. Or I didn't really think about trust through that lens. Or I didn't really think about, stepping into, we did one last week, you should feel comfortable stepping into any room you walk into. No other person should make you feel less than, regardless of the color of your skin or your age or your gender or any other factor. And so we try to bless people each day by just giving them a little thought that can be inspiring and help them on their journey.
Well, I talk about this a lot. Normally you say how, sometimes people are scared to walk into certain rooms. Sometimes we're scared to approach certain people. I won't even lie. I think there was a fear that set in even when it came down to like saying, hey, look, let me reach out to Adam. But a lot of times God has already opened those doors for us. It's just a matter of him wanting to see if we have the faith to step into that room. Walk through the door. He's already got the door prepared for you. He's got the person that doesn't even know you yet prepared to say, I would love to. But the question is, do you have the faith to step into that room, not worried about what your mind's telling you? Because our minds a lot of time will try to convince us that we're not enough.
That's right. Do you live by faith or do you live by fear?
Yeah. And you can't do both. You can't do both. You got to choose which one you want to do. So that's really important there. Well, hey, I think, man, this is a great conversation. I appreciate your vulnerability of even stepping into your story, explaining how what got you to this point, what allowed you to be able to create the content, and more importantly, how God has used you and continues to use you in so many different aspects of your life. Is there any thing that you would like to leave our listeners with as far as just something to really think about and maybe like focus on as they move into 2023?
Yeah, I think three things, Robert. I think one, you are in control of your life and the path that you take. God directs your steps, but you have to, there's a part that you play. Someone told me very early on, I'm sure you heard this saying too, God doesn't help those who don't help themselves. And so I think, really, really for your listeners, we're in the last week of the year. Think about whether you want to create a word for next year, or think about what you want to do differently, how you want to show up differently, how you want to behave differently going into next year. Anything you put in your mind, you can accomplish. I'm a firm believer in that. But you got to set plans, and you got to set strategies, and you got to take action and be committed to it. So that would be the first thing. I think the second thing, relationships are everything in life. And so I would encourage your listeners, to pick up a copy of the book if you really want to learn about how to build this blueprint, take this blueprint and apply it to your life. If you're looking for a man or woman or a spouse, if you're looking to, develop new business or start a company, like skills around relationships are critical. And so people should really focus on that too. And then I think the third thing, there's just so much that we can do as human beings, and really living by faith and not by fear. That, God's hand is over you. God's hand is there for protection, is there for provision. And you have to really lean into that and understand that he's directing your steps. I think for me, the last couple of years, the really exciting thing that I've seen is kind of knowing that God is within me too. And having work through me. How can I serve others? How can I help others? How can I be a good steward of the people that I manage and the firm that he's given me and the clients that he's blessed me with? And so, it's a partnership that you have with Christ, and you have to continually invest in that, just like you would invest in any other relationship.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow, that's really great. I don't think I could have ever said that better, man. You knocked that out the park on that one, man. Well, no, I appreciate your time. I thank you for taking out the time just to join me today and truly blessing my listeners with your story, with the skills, with the information, which I will definitely put in the bio. Not only the book, but the different posts, your website, to where they can go and truly like tap into what you're doing in your community. Because at the end of the day, we're all a community trying to grow each other. We're all a community that truly cares about each other. And I truthfully appreciate you connecting your information, your community to mine, so that we can all continue to grow. And I hope my listeners can truly tap into what you're doing there. I'd also like to thank everybody who joined us today on this conversation, and hope that you would subscribe, you would engage with different listeners or the content that we put out, not only on Adam's platform, but mine as well. My team who helps me put all this together, can't forget about them. And hey, I look forward to future conversations, future sits downs. I appreciate Adam being a brother that I can truly tap in with, reach out to for different things, and be able to really look up to what he's doing in his space, and what he's doing in his community, as well as in the area of diversity and all the other spaces that he creates. So, brother, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate everybody for joining us, and I hope that everybody can be blessed, and look forward to another episode.
Thank you.
Hey, we appreciate you listening today, and hope that if you enjoyed the conversation and stories, you will subscribe and listen to past and future content. Feel free to comment, as we would love to read your comments and pray over all of our listeners. Also, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at GodsGlory and Men's Real Stories.
We understand as men how the thought of even facing your own story and the pain and hurt that come with that is a challenging task. But we don't want you to feel like you are all alone, because you are not. God has not forgotten you or left your side, and He loves you no matter what you have done. Your healing is important to Him, and we want you to have these free resources that already exist if you're considering giving up or need someone to talk to. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line if you need to talk to someone. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential, and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle with mental health. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.